he, I went through my talk with him, and he gave me some ideas, so I put his name on. Sorry.
Okay, good afternoon. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome Hector Garcia-Molina, who is the keynote speaker today. Hector got his PhD at Stanford University, then was a professor for 12 years in Princeton until he got enough of the cold and the snow, as he said. So he returned to Stanford, held several important administrative positions, and is now a chaired professor. He has also quite a lot of distinctions. He is a fellow of the ACM, and what is kind of unusual, he is both a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and of the National Academy of Engineering. So it's a great pleasure for me to welcome. Thank you very much for coming here and sharing your thoughts on the future of recommender systems.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to walk around, so I'll be moving, but I've been told I can't cross this line in front of the screen, so there's nothing against that side of the room. I'll stay on this side. Maybe at some point I'll just jump over to the other side. So it's a great honor to be here in front of you, but I have to confess I'm a little nervous because I'm not an insider in this crowd. I'm not a recommender systems person, although I do have 1 or 2 publications, and I have done some work that I'll tell you about. But I don't consider myself an expert in this area. So it's kind of gutsy of me to actually not only come here and talk to you in a keynote, but also come and tell you about what I think is the future of recommender systems in front of all the experts here. So what do I know about this? You're the ones who know. But no matter what, I'm gutsy. I'm going to give it a try. Some might say I'm foolhardy or maybe suicidal. We'll see how it goes. While I was preparing my introductory thoughts, I remembered this story of something that happened at the San Francisco Zoo some years ago. There's a tiger enclosure there, and I have a picture here of that. There's the tiger. Actually, this is my son, David, that was taking the picture. But you notice there's a moat down here, right, like for a castle, so that the tiger doesn't jump out. Well, a few years ago, at closing time, a few teenagers started taunting the tiger and throwing things at it, and the tiger got so upset that it jumped the moat and attacked the kids. That actually happened. Now, of course, they have some glass or plexiglass partition there to keep the tiger there. So somehow I feel like I'm my son and the tigers are out here, and the moat is not very big here. Any moment now, I'll make some stupid remark about recommender systems, and some of you will jump up and attack me. So that's how I feel. Anyway, let me get started by telling you why I don't like current recommender systems. And I know some of you guys are working on these issues and so on, but here's my personal experience. David, my son, the same guy in the picture, a few years ago gave me a Kindle book reader, which changed my life. I'd liked reading a lot when I was younger, but then I sort of stopped reading because I was too busy and getting books was too hard. But with a Kindle, it's really great. I could travel and take a whole bunch of books with me. But I'm now struggling. I've read sort of the obvious books that I wanted to read, but now I'm struggling to find good books to read. Why? Well, because I don't have control over the recommendation strategy. Now, I know a lot of users say don't want to input anything and they want recommendations without any input, but I'm different. I would like to be able to tell the recommendation engine what I'm interested today. For example, there was a few months where I was very interested in medieval history, specifically Ireland and England, the English kings and so on. So I read a whole bunch of books, but then I got tired of that. But I still keep getting recommendations. Anytime I try to buy a book at Amazon, it still wants me to read medieval history books or novels. And that's not what I'm into these days. I'd like to read maybe Russian historical novels, for example. I cannot pick friends to consider. I know that they take into account what other people are doing, but I like to tell the engine, look, I trust my son, I trust somebody else. I want to use them as the people that drive my recommendations, or at least maybe I want to see their parameters. If they give me permission, why can't I see what types of books they're reading and getting recommended, right? But that I can't do that. When I like or not like, there's a lot more to just thumbs up, thumbs down. Why didn't I like it? Maybe it was because it was too long, or it was too romantic, or not romantic enough. I'd like to be able to tell more to the system. And then another thing that I'm going to touch on a little bit more is the fact that there are different ways to get into books, and they're all not integrated in a lot of the search engines. Again, I know, I apologize, a lot of you are working on some of these issues, but it's a pain. When I go to the search engine, I just get the results based on the keywords, and it doesn't understand about recommendations, and then I get recommendations in another box, and I get ads somewhere else. So one of the themes I'd like to start with in the sort of 3 or 4 topics that I want to cover today is what I think the future is the convergence of searching, recommendations, and ads. If you think of it, it's all basically the same thing. So that's what I'm going to argue, and I'll give you some examples there. Then I'm going to show how we can control the recommendation process a little bit more when you have these things put together. Another topic I want to cover is using humans. Unfortunately, Eric from Stitch Fix this morning stole my thunder. What I'm going to propose is a little bit different, but I'll argue that we need to get human intelligence to help me find the books I want to read. And then I have a couple of other topics there that if you guys ask questions, we won't get to, but that's fine. I'd rather have some discussion. I'd rather have the tigers jump over the moat and contradict what I'm saying. If not, I'll tell you some more about other ideas that I think are very useful in recommender systems based on the experience that I've had. Okay, so please ask questions. I don't want to be talking for an hour without any questions. So, okay, so the first theme is this idea that I claim that the process is basically the same for when you're searching using a search engine, when you are getting recommendations, and advertising. Why do I think it's the same thing? Well, just think of it. In all of those 3 processes, you get some input from the user. The user, now it varies a little bit, but what you get is some request, like a query. You might have location. We heard this morning about some talks about using location to improve the search or the recommendations. You have the history. You have the preferences of that particular person. Then you have down there a repository of knowledge. Some of that knowledge and objects are things that you might want. They're the description of the products that you might want to buy, web pages, books, whatever you're looking for. But then there's also the history of what people have done in the past and other information that you can use. And what you are outputting is information in all cases, right? Whether it's an ad, a recommendation, or a search, the user needs something. The user is seeking some sort of information out of the system. So why do we have to have 3 different interfaces, 3 different engines that are not compatible to do the processing? And now, of course, there are differences between advertising, recommendations, and search, but I claim that they're just sort of parameters that you can tweak. For example, this little table that we have here, by the way, this first part of the talk is based on a communications of the ACM invited paper that we wrote a couple of years ago, in case you're interested in seeing a more solid argument. So here's a list of the differences between these systems, but I think there are minor differences. And there's no reason why one of the choices has to go with search engines and one with recommenders. You can mix and match, I claim. And that's also the advantage of having an integrated system, that you could try different variations. For example, I might not go through all of these, but for example, the delivery mode. In search, it's typically pull. I go and say I want something, and then the system gives it to me. In advertising, it's push. I don't ask for the ads. They show up there uninvited, right? So and recommendations can be either. Some of the recommendations just show up, and sometimes I can go to an interface and say I want some recommendations as to what to read. But there's no reason why it has to be that way, or why couldn't I get a search to be pushed to me? I mean, I might give a standing query that I said anytime there's a new book on medieval history, I want to know about it, for example. And there are ways to do this, of course, but I just want to integrate everything. Just want to talk to one system, whatever my needs, I just want to go there and get the information. Second line, who's the beneficiary? What is the optimization process that you're going through? Is it the provider of the information, like in ads? That means that you're trying to optimize the profits or the click rate of the advertiser, or is it the user? Are you trying to satisfy the user, or is it a mix of both? In a lot of recommendation systems, it's a combination, right? You want to give useful suggestions, but also suggestions that will make me money, me being the advertiser or the site that's hosting this service. So it's a combination of goals that you have there. Unexpected good is an interesting one. Sort of what I mean here by this is that it is something that surprises me, good or not. So for example, for search, I claim that you usually have a well-defined goal in mind. So it's something that surprises you, then that's probably not what you wanted. But in recommendations, it's the opposite often. You get it might be a good recommendation that you were just not expecting. So that would be a good thing to do in recommendations. In ads, for example, probably not. If I'm searching for hotels in Rome, then it would be unexpected if I get saunas in Maui. Well, that's not what I was sort of doing my search on, so that doesn't seem that relevant. But again, these are just sort of vague ideas, and you could mix and match from these. I think you can sort of look at the others and sort of guess what they are. It's probably not worth going through all of them in detail. But let me stop at this point. Does anybody disagree with my premise that it'd be good to integrate everything together into one system?
Absolutely. So I think the beneficiary is a really important distinction. Precisely, I come to the system to get search recommendations for something for me. It's not in my interest as a user to have it integrated with something that may actually be designed against me. Yeah. At the very least, I'd rather keep them separate than unified as a user. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand the benefit of unifying it from the user's perspective.
Well, but wouldn't it be better for me to be able to say, because sometimes I do want to get the ads are useful to me. So if I'm buying something, for example, if I'm purchasing mode, wouldn't I be able to say to one place, yes, today I do want you to tell me what you think is best, what are good offers, and what things have been reviewed highly. So I'm not arguing that it should be one framework fit all. I want one framework, but that's flexible, that I can tailor depending on my needs. Right? So that's what I'm arguing. Yes, please.
So I really like this.
Oh, can you wait for the microphone? Oh, okay.
Maybe I can ask a question.
Okay, and then we'll get to you, and then I'll continue, yes.
Sorry, personally, I really like that the last row of your table have, for example, maybe, and maybe, right?
Yes.
Because there is also some overlap between this type of scenario we have. There is this notion of contextual search, where I, for example, is dependent on where my location, the type of terms I usually search, so there is a history there. So at some point, I mean, it's really nice to divide and separate these components, but we can also know that there is still some overlap between them.
Yes, yes.
So sometimes a search could be also a recommendation, type of recommendation.
That's right. So let me move the microphone over there. So yeah, that's exactly right. I want to think not of, do I want to search or do I want recommendations? I want to forget about those, go to one system, and I want to think in terms of these parameters, right? I want to say, okay, do I want you to consider the context? Which friends do I want you to consider, and so on for the context, or don't consider the context? So I'd like to have like ways to control those features and then have the same engine work for me. Yes?
I really like the unification idea and separating things in terms of these attributes. I would also add browsing as one of the...
What?
Browsing, like navigating
yes.
through links and stuff like that as one of the columns.
Great idea. Yes, I should extend my table. That's obviously another feature there, how you're navigating for information. Good. So let me continue. I know there's probably more questions, but let me do a little bit more, and then we'll get... Or is it a short question? This is great. I love I ask for questions.
No,
how am I handling the tigers? Are they okay?
So it's a question related actually to a question I asked when Netflix was making a presentation here, which is about trust. So if you mix recommendation and ads, don't you undermine the trust of users?
maybe I should hold this and then I can control who gets it. I have some enemies here. Yes. Yeah, again, it's a matter of control. I want to be able to maybe trust another line there in my table. So in some cases, I want to think only of trusted sources should influence the information that I get, no matter whether it's a recommendation or whether I'm searching, right? Why, if I'm doing a Google search, why not be interested in trusted sources there, right? Maybe I do want to get only sources that are authoritative on cancer, for example. But in other cases, maybe I just want to get a sense of what the world is saying about cancer, and I want trust to play a lesser role. So I think all these, again, the point is that I'm trying to make is that the division should not be recommendation, search, advertising. The recommendation should be along dimensions like these. They're not perfect, not worked out, but tell me what you want and how you want me to obtain and which context to use, and then I'll seek the information that you want. Okay, let me continue. I'm delighted to get all these questions. Just to sort of summarize, the features I envision this would be a single user interface. I don't want to deal with different results lists and so on. A unified display, share the data. If some site has acquired a profile, knows something about me, why not share it among the different needs that I have? And share the components. If I have an index structure, why have an index for ads and why have an index for web pages? Why not sort of index all the content? Now, there is a catch in all this. One of them, I'll skip the second one, is performance. I don't know if this will work because there are very tight performance constraints on systems. For example, typically, as I understand it, when you go to Google or Bing, you submit a query, the search for the ads to display occurs in parallel to the search for the web pages to display. And the reason for that is performance, because then they can be unified and you can see them more quickly. If they go through one engine, then there's a danger that it might take longer because you're doing it all together in one system. But there's also the benefit. If I'm doing it together, then the ads, which ads to display, might depend on what the web pages that you're getting show, right? So maybe if there is in the results you get a page for some company X, then maybe company Y wants to put an ad up. So not depending on what the query says, but depending on what the content of the result set for the search part is. Then having it integrated makes it easier to mix the two types of results into one integrated list. Okay? Heterogeneity, of course, is always a challenge when you try to combine things. The profiles, the objects are different, so it's a bigger problem. I'm not saying it's an easy problem, but I think it's something that's worth pursuing. Okay, so let me continue a little bit more and finish this topic. The other thing I'm saying in addition to integration is push for control of the recommendations. In other words, I'm there, there's this integrated machine that will seek information for me of any type, and it's using a lot of information. The targets, whether I'm looking for books or music or courses at Stanford, what others have done, my history, weights, which algorithm to use, and so on, and I'd like to have control of that. Now, this is something that I'm sure it's controversial because a lot of you, especially in industry, know that people don't want to spend the time telling their search engine or their algorithm how to work. So this is not for everybody, but there are a few oddballs like myself that like to be able to be in control and fine-tune the recommendation engine so I can get the books that I'm after, right? So this is not for everybody. So to illustrate this idea of how one would control things, let me take a little detour here and tell you a little bit about the little experience I have on recommendation systems. A project called CourseRank that we did at Stanford a few years ago. And I'll tell you what I learned from that and how I think we could have presented a more unified interface for that. So CourseRank, we started, we were interested in social systems where people interact. My students and I decided that students have a lot of choices for courses at Stanford, so it would be nice to build a system that helped them find courses that were relevant and good for them, and at the same time let us experiment with searching recommendation systems. Okay? So just a quick few slides of what the system did. These are slides from a few years ago, not the commercial version. CourseRank lets you just look for courses. I had some amazing students, undergraduates actually, that built the system. And it was a great way to just search and control. Nothing, from a research point of view, it's nothing novel, but it's just a very nice way to search engines. When the administration saw this, they terminated the contract with the provider that was doing the course catalog and asked the students to just run the course catalog for Stanford, and it's still running using that technology. So there was a very nice job. I'm just showing you this because there is search. That's one of the components that I was talking about. So there's a search interface, but separate. It's not integrated. Then you can get to courses. There are all sorts of information that we present. There's a funny story that I'll add here. We have this grade distribution for the course that tells you what grades that people get in the past. Now, you'll notice here it says official data. So for some courses, we were able to get the official grade distribution. The registrar was working with us and gave us the grades. But for other courses, especially in the humanities, the deans in the humanities did not want to share the data, even though we could approximate it very well because the users in CourseRank would report what grades they got in the courses they took. I'll show that in a minute. So we could approximate it. So why do you think that the humanities, my humanities colleagues, I hope there's nobody from the School of Humanities at Stanford here, were not willing to share the distribution of their courses? Any guess?
Too high.
It's too high, that's right. There's grade inflation. They were embarrassed. That's my explanation. The School of Engineering, on the other hand, did give us the data. Anyway, that's just an anecdote, some of the challenges we had in putting all this together. And then, of course, there are student-driven evaluations, reviews of the courses. And I can't begin, if I start telling you about all my colleagues who send me email to complain about the comments on their class, we will never finish the talk. Anyway, that was another aspect of this project. So anyway, we also presented books that were associated with that class. When in the system that we did, the experimental system, these were books that were suggested both by the bookstore that had the list of courses that went with a course, but also students could input books. And then we had links. I think at some point there were links to Amazon or wherever you could buy them, although we were not making any money at that point. But this is obviously a window for advertising, right? Because you can present books or other things that were related to the courses and make some money. But the system we built, not the commercial one that comes later, did not have real advertising, but it had the hooks for advertising. Then we also gathered a lot of information from the students. They told us they could work out their schedule, so it was a tool for them to build schedules. They could tell us what courses they were taking. And the reason why they took the time to give us all this information was that we would tell them how they're doing with respect to their requirements. Now, understanding the requirements for a degree at Stanford, and I think at most universities, is a challenge. Again, I could give a whole talk on how hard it is to get to understand what a department wants the student to do in terms of take some of these courses, don't take this one, do this, do that. So we try to capture all that, and we told them how far along they were in the course. But we knew what courses they'd taken. Here are the self-reported grades that they tell us. It was a nice way for them to record the grades, and that's where we compute the grade distribution if the humanities departments didn't give it to us. And finally, if you expanded on the requirements, the system could give you recommendations based on the requirements. So this, I thought, was a very neat aspect of the system because we had a lot of information about our customers, the students. We knew what grades they've gotten, what courses they've taken, when they took them, and we know that they're a CS major. Then we could not only recommend courses that were interesting and useful to them, but courses that would help them complete their degree requirements faster. Okay? And that's another challenge. Then I have a few slides on that if we have time at the end, but that's just the point that if you understand your customers and the application well, then you can do much better at recommending things. Okay? So that's the recommendation side of CourseRank. So just to wrap up the little story on CourseRank, it was in use for about 4 years at Stanford. It was extremely popular. Almost all the undergraduates were using it for planning. The advisors would tell the undergraduates, before you come to me, go to CourseRank, work out your schedule, and then come and show it to me, and I'll approve or I'll talk to you about it. So it was very popular. As I said earlier, it handled all the catalog searches from the registrar, and all the Stanford course evaluations were also displayed. Those were independent from the course rank evaluations, but you could also find all the official course evaluations that Stanford provided through there. So obviously we had a lot of help from the registrar to do this, to work with us. This was like 4 years ago. The students graduated, unfortunately. I wanted to keep them, but they graduated. And they went off, started a company that existed for a year. Then they were bought by Chegg, which was a firm that specialized in textbook sales and rentals for students. Now they combined CourseRank with Chegg. The name CourseRank is not used anymore by Chegg. But currently, the CourseRank part of Chegg, I told my former student told me they have more than 1,000 universities, 1.3 million course reviews, and recommendations are a key part of the system. They use it a lot to drive textbook sales from that. Although I have to confess that the recommendation engine of the commercial system is not quite as good as the one we had at Stanford, because they have a lot of less information about the requirements and what the student is doing. The advantage of our system was that we were at Stanford. We can go and get data from the registrar. We could go and get data from the department heads and incorporate it into our recommendation engine. It's hard when you have 1,000 universities to go out and get that level of detail and that quality of data. So the recommendation engine is not quite as good as what we have. Okay, time for questions. And Ricardo, you get the microphone. Oh, I crossed the line. Uh-oh, I'll have to stay on this side now. Sorry.
It's a very short question. I mean, why Stanford doesn't use it now?
Why doesn't Stanford use it? Well, because the students wanted to make money.
So Stanford
no, but Stanford is using it, but the commercial version.
Okay, that was not clear.
Oh, yes, sorry, no. So Stanford is using, okay, you'll stay on this side. Oh, cross one more time. Okay, waving to the camera. So yes, no, Stanford, yeah, that was the Stanford system, and then the commercial system they're using, but the one that does the nice recommendations is not in use right now. Any other comments? Yes, back there.
Yeah, speaking about convergence between search and recommendations, you showed a slide on searching graphics. When you search for graphics on CourseRank, is it a search results based? Are the search results based on just a query, or does it take the users' requirements, etc., to rank it?
No, this is not integrated. This is not show my vision. That's the next slides I'm going to show.
Okay.
This was not integrated. This idea that we should have built it all together is what should have come next if the students hadn't gone off to make money. Okay. Yeah. And I have a few slides about that. That's one of the things we have to deal with. Any other questions? Okay, let me continue then. We'll handle more in a few minutes. Based on this, I have a few slides here. Oh, first on the lessons learned. So looking back as I was preparing the slides, I said, well, what did I learn about CourseRank? One thing, and I think I might have hinted at this, is that understanding the domain is very important. It was great that the students that were building this were students, so they understood all the details and the preferences, what their colleagues or students wanted to see. It was also good that we were all embedded at Stanford and that we were trusted by our registrar so that we could go to the deans and the registrar and ask for data. We didn't get it in all cases, as I said, but we got a lot of data, and the more data you have, the better it is. And another thing is that academics are not easy to please. There's not that much money to be made in universities because professors think they're all geniuses and they know better than you do. So it's tough. I gave you the example of getting the data out of the humanities professors. There were a lot of issues like that. But on the other hand, it's a very interesting application. It's very rich. There's a lot of things that could be done in that environment, and I'm going to illustrate one of them. In the next slides that talk about what could be improved. If I was redoing or building CourseRank version 2, here's how I would do it. First thing to note is that it's not just about recommending courses. Given the wealth of information that we have, you could recommend also or search all sorts of things, right? Some students don't know what they're majoring in, what they're specializing in. So they're constantly looking for, what should I major in, computer science or electrical engineering or whatever. Students might also want to find departments. What department offers, what is the best department to go and do a research project with? There is the quarter. Quarter, like a semester, at Stanford, we're divided by quarters. One of the questions is, this class is offered 3 times a year. Which is the best quarter for me to take this class? Some quarters it's easier, some quarters it's harder. If you're pre-med, there's some pre-med class that you have to take, so you should take this class before or after that. So there are all sorts of constraints that you have to satisfy, but that's something else that people might be interested in. So the first thing is, you could recommend a lot of things, and you could give a lot of information. It's not just, here's a good course, but it's, here's a course that we think you could do well in. For example, if that was your need, I want an easy course, I want to get an A. Or we could also tell you, I'm taking this class, what do you think I'm going to get? Right? If given my history, how I've done in the other classes, if I take this class, do you think I'll pass? Do you think I'll get an A or a B? That's also a recommendation. Right? So there's a lot of things in this application. It's a really rich and interesting domain. So what I would like to see is a system that lets me have control. Going back to my theme of control, I'd like to be able to say, what am I looking for? How do I want this? What factors should go into account? So this is a first sketch. This is not implemented, obviously. This is just some PowerPoint vaporware where I'd like to, I'm a student. I want to go and say, OK, first, what information do I want? Right? It's not whether you want a recommendation or you're searching. The thing is, what are you seeking? Let me use the word seek, right, to not bias it to search. I'm seeking thing. So you might get a major, the instructor, students, quarters, what are you looking for? Then say we select course. Then there are some filters that appear under course, because you told me you want courses, but there might be some search type filters where I say, well, I only want courses in this department, or courses that are only offered in the fall quarter, or whatever. Okay? Then you go to the recommendations panel, and you say, what should I take into account to recommend to you? Are you worried about grades or things that your friends did and so on? So here are some possible choices that people could present. I want to base what you're going to tell me not just on my search part, but also on what other students like me have taken, the traditional recommendation. But maybe I want to do students with similar grades, right? I do want to narrow down students that have gotten grades like me, high or low grades, whatever it might be. Or students with similar courses, or that have whatever. So I can specify some of the parameters. Now, of course, this list might vary depending on what you're looking for and what you've specified here. But I'll integrate it into one interface. Okay? Then once I check my strategy, say students with similar tastes, then I can in addition filter down those students. Maybe even specify a particular student, right? I want to have this and this student, or my friends in Facebook, or whatever, be used as the students that are used for guiding the filtering. Okay? So that's sort of the vision that I would like to see in CourseRank and in a lot of other search and recommendation and advertising systems. Okay? So that's all I had to say about that topic. Let me pause here again and see if we have other questions or complaints. There's somebody back there. I'll let you take the microphone this time so I don't block the screen.
I just think that it makes sense for such a high stakes.
I'll repeat the question. Yeah. Go. Oh, okay.
I was gonna comment that for such a high stakes system where maybe you're selecting a major or you're selecting a course for the whole semester or quarter, it makes sense to have very structured data entry from the user. But for a lot of consumer apps, it's something very fleeting. You want the user to express their interests with very less friction, is the buzzword. What are your thoughts on that in terms of doing something similar, giving the user control, but doing it in an easy way?
Yes, that's a great point. I mean, the downside of what I suggested here is that it takes a lot more participation, right? When you deciding your major, you're willing to spend some time to get right recommendations, or you want to willing to try several alternatives in the path here to get more recommendations. When I'm looking for a book, I also am willing to spend time because I'm going to spend a few days or a week reading a book. I mean, I read them fast, but some of these books are really fat. So I'm willing to spend the time. But somebody who wants to watch a movie, I mean, you all know this, right? I mean, they don't want, I mean, you can, might as well just go and watch the movie for a few minutes and you get a sense of what it's like. So yes, how much time does the user willing to spend interacting with the system will vary a lot. And that's one of the downsides of what I'm advocating.
I have
you have another question?
Not a question, but this is very complicated interface, and I'm, from my expertise, I'm absolutely sure that in most cases your algorithm can better understand what type of instances are you searching, and in most cases, especially when you have well-structured data, you can just predict what type of instances and do search, and your ranking algorithm can do better than people.
Well, that is not in my case. I mean, I don't get the book recommendations that I want because of the factors I described earlier. My interests change. I am in a different mood. It just doesn't work for me. Now, I agree. Maybe I'm an oddball. I'm not the typical customer. One time, some years ago, I was complaining to Rick Rashid, who's at Microsoft, about Word. This is completely off topic. The Word editing system, I was complaining it doesn't do the things when I'm writing papers. I was forced to use Word for some document, and it was terrible. I couldn't place the boxes where I wanted and so on. And Rick, who was the head of research, told me, Hector, we don't care about you. You're not our target customer. That was his response. So yes, I might not, if I'm not the target customer for your company, then ignore what I'm saying. But as a researcher, maybe we should try to push the envelope a little bit and see how far we can get along these lines before we give up. Who has the microphone? Yeah.
So it's about, in these slides you mentioned search, recommendation, advertising kind of interchangeably. Is it a fair statement to say this is all a constraint, optimization problem in search space or in a search space, and that whether it's an advertisement, a recommendation, or a search depends on your objective function?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the objective function can take different factors into account. Like as I said, are you trying to benefit the provider of the ads or the customer or what? Yeah. That would be a nice framework to think of this unified search engine that I'm advocating. Okay. I think the microphone is heading this way. And I think I'll take this last question, and then I'll move on a little bit, and then we'll come back to more questions. Yes?
Yeah, no, I just want to support your position, actually.
Great,
I've been working in interfaces and controllability, explainability, and I have the impression that we are suffering something like we sometimes complain that we ask people to give their perception about the recommendation or what do they like, but then they do something different. So they give 5 stars to a movie or to a genre of a very, I don't know, interesting movie, but then we end up watching whatever TV series or something more popular, right?
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the conference, there was a slide from Alfred saying that, we are missing a lot of papers in interfaces and more user control, but turns out that in the workshop of interfaces, there were few people. So we think that it's important, but too much, we don't care too much in the community. That's my impression.
Yeah. So food for thought. Yes, I agree. So let me move on so I can get to at least a second topic that I wanted to touch on, which is this idea of using people for recommendations. Now, unfortunately, Eric Koisen, I don't know if he's here still. He was a speaker this morning. I heard his talk, and he gave a much better talk than what I'll be able to do here, so my apologies. I'll go quickly through, because he already introduced crowdsourcing. My idea is a little bit different than his, but the idea of crowdsourcing and the motivation is the same, right? Humans have certain abilities that computers don't have yet. This is an early example of crowdsourcing where you ask somebody else to find the bad guys. There's a lot of other examples where you're using people out there to find current prices of objects, to categorize images, which is Eric's example of the dog that was angry. Finding missing children after an earthquake, for example, and so on. There's a lot of companies, many of them in this Silicon Valley, that are providing services, consulting services, services to find you workers, like Mechanical Turk or Odesk are 2 examples that are well known. There's also companies that are trying to get funding for you, and it's a very diverse ecosystem that's developing as we speak. There's also a lot of interest at universities. This is probably out of date. There's a longer list, but there's a lot of academic interest, and my research has been on crowdsourcing, not necessarily in recommendation systems, but when I had the chance to talk to this group, I said, well, maybe those can be combined. So independent of Eric and Stitch Fix, I thought of, well, could we use humans to give me a good book recommendation, for example? But before I take up that idea, let me briefly tell you about a system that we have built for the search part. Right? Again, I'm saying that we should integrate all this, but initially we did only search. So this one is called, I guess the name will come in a second. The motivation is that there are, even no matter how good Google and Bing and other engines are, there's still some cases, it's not the standard case, but there are cases where it's very hard to describe to a search engine what I want. The middle one was my contribution. I had a USB cable that broke, and I wanted to replace it. Now, I know roughly that there are like 20,000 different types of USB cables. There's USB 2, 3, 1. There's males, there's female. There's mini USB, there's micro USB, there's this, that. And for somebody who doesn't understand all this, wouldn't it be nice if you could just take a picture with your phone and say, I want something that connects to this, or here's my broken cable, get me a cable like that. Now, that's something that you can't submit to Google or to Bing or any search engine because they don't know what you're talking about. There are a few other examples. The bottom one doesn't use photos, but it's a query that is hard for a computer to handle. You could do it with clothing, as Eric did this morning. Right? I want a nice outfit that fits together. Well, Google's not going to be able to understand that. So what we did is, and this is a type of result that you like to get, and that you get from our system. That's the query on top, and then you get answers for that were provided and curated by human beings. In our case, we're using Mechanical Turk. You can also target it for different sites. Right now, think of the user saying, giving you the target type of object that you want, web pages from Amazon, for example. Although in general, you could get different stores, for example, if you want it, but we haven't done that yet. So how does this work? The system is called Datasift, and my former students, Aditya and Ming Han, worked on this. It works as follows. You take on the left what we call a rich query, one of these queries that are complex for a search engine but can be handled by a human. Then Datasift takes it, and Datasift has two resources. One, it of course can go to Google and get web pages, or go to Amazon and get product pages or whatever, but it can also ask people what is a good thing to do. Now, I'll give you an example of how this processing works. This is not the only flow of work. We're experimenting with different workflows, but here's one. You get the query. Now, you can't send that query directly to Amazon because it doesn't know the picture. Think of the USB cable. So what do? Well, we send it to one first set of workers and tell them, here's what the user wants. What would you type into Amazon or Google to find this cable? So the first intervention by a human is to translate the user request into Google speak or Amazon speak. Okay? Then we get, that's what I called in this diagram, K. It's a set of keyword queries that can then be submitted to Amazon or Google or whatever your target is. Now, for each of those those keyword queries, you start getting results. Now, users, the crowd is not perfect. They can make mistakes. So the next step is to calibrate. Some of those keyword queries might not be good. So you need to check if the results you're getting from a particular keyword, maybe USB 3 cable is what the query is. Then you get some results. Then we go again to the crowd and ask them, here are some results. Do you think they match? So, sorry, well, I guess I could show you the. So we go to the query in the second step and show them the user query and show them some of the hits that we've gotten from Amazon or from other stores and ask them, is this a good match for the original user need? And then we can evaluate how good were the user keyword, the worker keyword queries that we got. And once we identify that this was a good one, then we can go and get more results from the store and filter them again and then finally compile a list that's a mix of the results from some of the best keyword queries that we got and present that to the user. Okay? I forgot to show you, this is the first step where we're asking the user to translate the rich query into Google speak or Amazon speak, right? Simple keyword queries that can give us the results that you want. And this is an example of the other interface where we're asking workers to evaluate the quality of the results that the keyword query is getting us. Okay? So that's the process, and it works fairly well, except for one feature. It works well. You get results like this one that are fairly accurate because they've been curated by humans, in our case from Mechanical Turk. What is the disadvantage of this approach? I'm sure some of you have figured it out. It's slow, right? This is not the type of search engine where you can sit and type a query and get your result instant gratification. It'll take 10, 15, 30 minutes, an hour to get the results. And second, it's expensive. Well, so it's costly. So you're going to have to be paying people to do the work for you. And even though Eric said that they don't, I guess the shipping was free or the recommendations were free in that case, well, they're not really free. The customer that's buying the clothes is paying for all that one way or another, obviously. So here it's going to be more direct because you have to say how much money do I want to spend on asking people to help me solve this query. In our system, you specifically give a budget how much money you have. Okay? So obviously, again, this is not for everybody. If you are an expert on USB cables, then obviously you don't need this Datasift, right? You can just go and you do the translation yourself and you find the things that you want directly. So it's not useful for an expert. If you're unemployed and have nothing to do, then it's not for you either because you can just spend endless hours browsing the web and clicking and so on, and you might eventually find it. So it's for somebody in between who doesn't have the time to spend looking at for something that matches their needs and who's not an expert in that area, who would rather delegate the work to somebody else who can help them with this. Okay? So that's the main drawback of the system. But again, I think my feeling is that it's worth investigating more. This is just more of a demonstration. It's a working system, but it's more a proof of concept, right? That you could do something interesting with the crowd in a more general framework than what Eric was presenting this morning, which was more specific for clothing. Not that his idea wasn't very good. It's also, I think, a very reasonable approach. Can we use this Datasift idea for recommendations? Well, as Eric said this morning, definitely, I think humans, for my type of needs for recommendations for books, can do much better. When I manage to find a friend who knows about books, there's a good chance he or she might be able to give me some good recommendations. So I like dealing with humans. So I would be willing to pay some money to get some good recommendations. I don't have enough friends to ask for, so I need to pay for my friends to give me recommendations. So I think definitely that's true. Now, how would crowd recommendations work? I mean, how can we go from Datasift to crowd recommendations? Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, and I don't know the answer. So I'm going to have to leave it at this. But you can brainstorm a little bit. I mean, I think there are many options. You could just send the request. I can type down, I'm interested in historical novels set in Russia in this time period, and I want them to have not any sex or a lot of sex, or I want this, I want that. And then send it out to people. Again, it's not going to be Mechanical Turk. It's probably going to be some site of a group of people that specialize in book recommendations and get the feedback. So it just could be one shot, right? Here's my request. Give me something back. But it could also be multiple step, as I showed here, where I get some data and then I reformulate my queries, go back again to the crowd, then have a verification step where the crowd sort of verifies that the recommendations are good before I get them, and so on. So let me stop at this point and see if there are more questions. Well, you decide. You have the microphone.
I want to look at your first question, whether a human can find books for you. And I would suggest that maybe some of your friends can find you the right books for some areas, but can anyone find you the right books or not? So suddenly the problem becomes finding the right person for that area for you.
Yes. Great point, yes. So the challenge, yes, you're absolutely right. The challenge is matching. You have experts, right? Some on fashion, some on history books, some on romance novels or whatever. And the challenge is, part of the second bullet is, you need to route it to somebody who has something to say about that. And for example, Mechanical Turk has a very broken way to do this because there's just a list of tasks and then people go and read and select. But Odesk, for example, another crowdsourcing company where 2 or 3 of my former students are working, has a much more sophisticated way of doing it where you actually, the workers post their CVs in a sense, their qualifications, and then you actually can interview them. You can post a job description and that, so maybe that's a little too heavy for what we want here, but there are ways to sort of match your needs to more adequate workers for your needs.
The book recommendation problem transforms into a person recommendation problem in some ways.
So the question was again that the book recommendation well, I wouldn't say transforms into a person, but there's a first step, right? Because that's not all, that's the first step. You have to find the right person. Yeah, and it could be, I don't know, maybe you can have a group of people that specialize in books and they have areas of expertise. There could be some sort of routing. There's a lot of interesting problems, I think. I mean, as I said, the short answer is I don't know how it'll work, but I hope some of you will work on this problem and tell me in a few years. Somebody else has a microphone?
Yes. I think the approach is somewhat similar to what most web forums do. I think you have a fuzzy idea of what you're searching for, and you write something, and then you ask people and wait for their answer. Mm-hmm. What would you think is the main advantage of this system?
So you're talking this recommendation system or Datasift?
I mean the whole system.
Well, but the two parts. Datasift is a system that we built that sort of does what Google does, but for more complex queries. But it doesn't do recommendations. Yes. It just does such. Yes, and I'm saying we could extend it to do recommendations in some future version.
Yeah, I mean the recommendation thing.
The recommendation part, okay. So but what was the question? Sorry, now I got...
web forums are pretty similar to what you propose with this system. You have a fuzzy idea what you're searching for, and you ask people about it and wait for their answer. So,
but the search engine doesn't ask people for information. I mean, if I type into Google the box, I say, I'm looking for a historical novel set in Russia in this time period with Peter the Great, hopefully, and it should have this and that.
No, but you can find a good web forum about books and ask people directly.
Ask what? Oh, forum, okay.
Forum. Mm-hmm. And then you can ask people directly instead of using...
yeah, but then I'm doing the work, right? So I have to go find which forum, I have to ask the question, I have to interpret the result. What I'm saying is I want to have somebody else do that work.
Okay, so it's just easier. Okay.
Yeah, so it's just easier. And again, it's not for the expert. If you understand that there are forums where you can discuss books and know how to deal with that and know how to, then you're fine. You don't need this type of solution, just like with the search engine. If you know how to find USB cables, you don't need Datasift. So this is for people, this recommendation engine would be for people like me. I'm too busy to go and spend hours in a forum trying to get the information. I'd like to subcontract the task, say, here's what I want. Just like to a secretary, right? I want to give it to my secretary and have him or her go off and find the stuff for me and just give it to me at the end.
Yeah, so part of the problem is to find the right experts
yes.
that can help you. Of course, the other issue is the incentives, right? You need to have some business model
that
right. works, right?
Absolutely, yes. So you need a business model, yes. In Datasift, we used Amazon Mechanical Turk, so we paid the workers who were doing the work. Odesk has a different incentive model where you still pay the workers, but Odesk takes a cut of the fees. Yes, so there has to be some motivation. It can be money. It can be some people might do it just for fun to help others. But yeah, definitely the incentive model for all of these systems that use people. Some of these crowdsourcing systems use games as an incentive. So you could get people motivated by having them play a game. Yes.
So what's the difference between this model and kind of a question and answering system that you could potentially match similar questions and for those that have already been provided answers, get those quicker And if you have a rating system that that says the answer for this question is better than others, then you can automate a lot of this process, right?
Yes. So I view a question answering system as another resource, right, that sits under the system that I envision. Because I don't want to have to think, oh, do I go to Amazon or to this forum or to this question answering system? I like to go to one place, specify my information needs, and then have a human translate that request, if you will, to, oh, I think this answer is in a forum. Let's go and ask the question there and monitor the responses. Or maybe it's already been asked in a question and answer system, so I go and look over there, and so on. So what I'm envisioning is more higher level that would require more of the human intelligence to know where to search and how to speak the language that's spoken on the forums, on the question answer systems, on Google, and so on. I think we're almost out of time. So maybe we can just take one or two last questions, and then.
So my question is actually, I think this is an awesome approach to such kind of semantic questions. But on the other hand, some people probably already write the answer somewhere on the internet. So another approach, of course, might be more intensive, resource intensive, is to look at the web text and find out those answers and then use them in the results, rather than asking individuals about. So
do you really think there's going to be there's a web page out there that specifically has a good book for a historical novel set in Russia, in the period of Peter the Great, that has that's not no love scenes or a lot of love scenes and a lot of gore or no gore and so on? I kind of doubt that, because that's a very specific need that I want for me. I mean, it's very personal. This is what I'm in the mood for today. I don't think you can just find that. Now, if you can, then it'll be for the human, my electronic secretary, to go and find out, okay, maybe I can just do a web search for some questions.
I think it's actually levels of the specificity, and also about how, the skill that the person is searching. And sometimes you'll be amazed that there are lots of customized, already cross-sourced material online.
Yeah.
And some, for example, if you want to search for fashion stuff, right? There's a lot already Pinterest.
Yeah.
So you may not need to curate the content from another group of experts, because the group of experts already curate that content.
Yeah.
So all you need to do is find the matching. So I don't think that way that I suggest will solve 100% of the question you propose here, but maybe 50%
for some questions,
is
yes.
already solved.
Yes. But I don't want to worry about whether it's been solved or not before. I want to just ask my question and then have humans who can help me find which is the right source for the information. What was the last question?
Can I say one quick thing? It's just about the search recommendation, because I've been struggling with these two concepts actually a lot in my daily job.
Which concepts?
Search and the recommendation.
Yeah.
I happen to be a PM on both sides, and I actually find them kind of cross-field a lot. So I'm really excited to hear you talk about merge them. Because to be frank, many times, for example, you could see drugstore have a module called search also viewed, and wine.com have search also bought. And then you think that's recommendation modules, right? But if you incorporate the purchase data and clicks data into search algorithm, it becomes a ranking. So I think the line actually is really fuzzy between these two. Yeah. And I like Jeff Dean's talk yesterday. He just called recommendation is something the computer suggests what user likes. Mm-hmm. So I think if you think that way, eventually these two will merge, even just by the machine algorithm behind it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess there's one last short comment back there. Oh.
I don't mean to play the tiger, but you think that it's not possible or not likely that in the near future recommender systems are so well developed that we won't need human intervention at all to get you the nicest books or the most appropriate?
That would be wonderful. The other question is, will I live long enough to see that? Excuse me? Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I mean, it's eventually we won't need humans for anything, right? The robots are going to take over. Just watch the Terminator movies. Okay, well, maybe we should stop here. Thank you. This is a great set of questions. I think that I didn't get mauled too bad by the tigers, but there's still time. I'll hang out here for a few minutes after the talk if you have additional questions or comments.
So thanks a lot. and congrats how well you could tame the tigers here in this room. Now, we do not have a break now, but the hotel needs a few minutes to set up the stage for the subsequent panel discussion.
And the panelists could come to the front, we'll be starting at 2:45 sharp.